Yes, time for another draft physics video production and such. Yeah. Comments, lots of comments, and there's going to be one by the stray cats person, and I know I'm just going to hate it. This isn't that complicated. I really, I mean, I'm trying to be patient, but when you have to turn everything into ABC blocks, the conversation is difficult. It isn't worth it, frankly. Too much trouble to even to start the sentences. you know. All right, so change of pace. Is Thornhill basing a lot of his theory off a large amount of assumptions? Well, they're not assumptions; they're contentions by loop-de-doos who wish to glorify the silly stories, the fables of antiquity. So the fish stories made up by our preposterously full of shit ancestors, they want to give those credibility and create talking trees and other kinds of silly crap. And they think all that stuff has a rational explanation, like there really were talking trees. Yeah. No, there weren't. Yes, he is. So, no, it's not just assumptions, it's complete omissions. He's taken all the physical physics, out of physics, like most of the wooers. He just doesn't bother with things like charge, fundamental subjects, for which he has no clue. And he, like all the other dissidents, they tear down stuff by just making straw man. I mean, they make the fake town, just like in Blazing Saddles, and then burn it down. I mean, it's just bullshit. Your explanation also is a bit drafty. Well, the explanation of what? I mean, my counter argument to what? Craters created by lightning bolts? I mean, that's not exactly my theory that lightning bolts didn't cause the craters on the moon. I mean, that's conventional physics that I don't think is crazy. I don't think Thornhill is saying it was created on Saturn. Well, that's what he's saying. But rather making a point that the Earth and Saturn must be related because of sharing the same source for the water. Well, my point is that the water doesn't get there for free from nowhere. And the odds are that the water, either moved from the inside of the solar, from the outside to the inside, or from the inside to the outside. Now, I'd obviously say the more likely is from the inside to the outside. But of course, they would share some common elements. I'd say, of course, they would. This is where I turn to disagree. Thornhill is making an assumption here that Earth and Saturn have to be connected. Well, I would argue that if you think they're not connected, then you really don't understand where they came from, I suppose. I don't think they were captured, all right? The planets weren't captured by the sun, because that's really hard to do. It's really hard to get into an orbit from the external. Gravity isn't orbit friendly to external objects. It kills them usually, and because you have a long way to travel to get into the sun's gravity, let's say. And the whole point is that the whole time you're bending right towards the sun. So the whole time you're basically being turned into a straight line towards the sun. You're not turned to some orbit position. Your velocity is going to end up being towards the sun, and you'll crash into it. That's what gravity really does. These fake little wells that people see where they throw marbles and shit gives you a completely false impression, because that's already high gravity, and you're throwing them into the high gravity. You didn't bring them into the gravity slowly and gradually, because they'll just take a nice little arced line and crash right into the sun. So the planets had to be stuff ejected, I would argue, or else it was stuff that was captured closer to the sun and expanded out, something like that. But it's junk that collected. The planets were formed in the solar system. I guess I'm just saying that kind of overtly. I don't think it has to be exactly the same source. It could be the water has come from a similar source, and this could explain the similar ratio of deuterium and hydrogen to hydrogen in the water. I'm just saying the water came from the same place, and it came from the same place the planets did, which is they didn't come they came as little atoms to the solar system. They didn't arrive here as oceans and clumps. They arrived here as bits. Anyway, stating that water was formed closer to the sun and was transported out to Saturn, missing Mars, Venus, etc., in vast quantities has a very low probability and does not hold water. Well, frankly, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I would say it's improbable also, but I would also say we don't know what happens to water to transition it either, which might have happened on places like Venus and Mars. I mean, Venus being exceptionally hot and Mars being exceptionally cold. Though I'm sure this is just an example. However, it should have been scripted and more properly thought out. Well, he's just making a collection of straw man arguments. I mean, arguments that require you to do some research. So he debunks things by just the sledgehammer approach. Oh, Einstein's theory has two bodies in it, and what's two bodies doing in it? Where did the other body come from? You know, some kind of blah, 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 blah. And there's nothing really deep to it, but it takes you some time to explain why, well, you really can't do the math unless you create a test charge. You know, you can't really do an equation about what the force is in a location unless you put something in the location. It's just sort of the rules of doing math. That kind of thing. It's like a simple explanation for the trick, okay, he's using to say, look how flawed it is. A better example would be to be a collection water-rich asteroid from the same place hitting Earth and Saturn system as they were both in this collection of asteroids' path. Well, asteroids are a rational source of water, so but how that water gets to the asteroids is another question too. You know, again, where were the asteroids formed? Are they coming from external? Are they bits of crap that is, you know, from collisions that took place within the solar system? Like, you know, if we argue the asteroid belt could have created comets, why not? I mean, if two planets collided, you know, to create the asteroid belt or something like that, you know, you're just saying, well, yes, there's lots of things, lots of bits could fly off at higher velocities and be in very, very weak orbits, you know, big, wide orbits. All right, anyway. Yeah, it's just, look, the motivations of the Thunderbolt project is clear. I mean, their videos are clearly Pollyanna mush, where they're trying to say, look, the ancients drew a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. You're like, no, it's not a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. It's a picture of a round thing. You know, and at the last video, I saw some guys talking about, I don't know, Scottish lock mazes or something, and speculating how this is the key to the universe or some other bullshit. And you're just like, what are you talking about? Primitive people fell on concepts, you know, like, you know, circles within circles within circles or something. And, you know, they played with the things they found out that were little tricks, little deceptive tricks. You know, you could fold a piece of paper and make an airplane. You know, I mean, little tricks. So what? That doesn't mean they had some profound insight. Anyway. So here's Mr. Monk. When the atom is moving the bit backwards, it is bringing it closer to the bits behind it. And you're just ignoring the point that it's also bringing them further from the target and further from the other bits that are still moving the speed of light in free space. So this is like a horse race, right? Now, nothing really happens for the wavelength purposes, right? But the distance between the horse number 1, horse number 2, horse number 3, that distance isn't dependent on anything but measuring when the first horse leaves. That's when the distance has to change. after the first horse is free. So the bell just went off. The first horse is running free. What is the second horse doing? Well, he's in a delay. He's in the trap. Now, the trap represents the time it took the first horse to get free of the trap. So that trap time doesn't make any difference. But what else is he doing while he's in the trap? So he's not able to move. Well, what else is happening besides not moving while he lets the first horse get the proper frequency away, the same frequency they went in with, the delay? So what's happening during the delay? I'm picking up the frickin' horse and I'm moving him away from the finish line, okay? I'm moving him in the opposite direction that the first horse already left in at the speed of light. So not only is he getting the delay, which is fair because everybody has the delay, but he's also getting picked up and moved, okay, away from the opposite direction that the other horse left in. And you can't understand how that's going to break the frequency. That means the distance between the first horse and the second horse is going to be increased. And I'll have to explain it over and over again, that you have to account for the distance moved while the horse isn't running. Fuck. You haven't touched that argument. You just keep ignoring it. Alright. I mean, I said in the video, I already addressed this issue of closer. I already pointed out, it doesn't matter whether the delay happens, if you have a delay in your day, it doesn't matter whether it's driving to work or driving home. Your work day is still going to be longer. Can you understand? If you have to be at the job 8 hours, and it takes you an extra 15 minutes to get there, it's not any different than it take you an extra 15 minutes to get home. So where I put the delay doesn't matter. How close I move it to one side or the other doesn't matter. Each individual thing will have to experience the delay. The important fact is during the delay, I also backed your car up. So now that's the part that's going to increase the frequency. There's no point. Alright, it's just time to block the guy. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just, we cannot communicate. You just cannot fucking get it. So to spell it out clearer, no, I've already spelled it out as clear as it can fucking goddamn be. I said if the goddamn hydrogen atom isn't moving, what do you think fucking happens? Will you answer that fucking question? So the hydrogen atom isn't moving. The photon goes in, it gets trapped, the hydrogen atom isn't moving, and I said clearly, well, obviously the frequency's not going to change. But if the fucking hydrogen atom is fucking goddamn moving, alright, you have to account for that. That's going to be a different universe, you jackass. It isn't for free. Not moving and moving are not the same fucking thing. Moving has a consequence, and you either explain how it increases the frequency or decreases the frequency. You either explain to me how it makes the wavelengths longer or it makes them shorter, but it has to fucking change them, fuckhead. The two circumstances can't, oh yeah, it's just the same. It's the same if somebody picks me up, moves me backwards away from the starting line. Well, that's the same as if I ran right from the starting line. No, it's not the fucking same, shit for brain. I'm sorry, I'm pissed, but it's just, this is bullshit. So to spell it out, fuck you. There's nothing to spell out. You haven't addressed the fucking increase in the fucking distance. Okay, when the atom hits the nth bit. So he's doing this nth. I already told you I don't want to read this nth crap. You can't say photon 1, photon 2, photon 3, photon 4. Quanta, bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're in a fucking row, you fucking idiot. Okay. He's spelling it out by n plus 1. What the fuck does that mean? Nth. The distance between the nth and the when we say the same bullshit. He's just typing the same shit all over again and ignoring what I've said. Is made shorter for a small time. I've already pointed out how it's irrelevant because it's shorter because it moved in the opposite fucking goddamn direction. That distance will either be traveled at the speed of light by the photon, or it's going to be traveled by the negative distance, the negative movement of the hydrogen atom. So that distance can't possibly matter. Where you interact, where you cause the delay, doesn't fucking goddamn matter. The point is while you're delayed, you're moving backward. Shit. All right. Then the nth bit is released, and so he's just ignoring my argument. My argument is the clock doesn't start till the first bit leaves. It's never going to be moved. It's not going to be delayed again. It's not going to be anything anymore ever again. Okay, so it's free. It's moving away from the second bit. What's the second bit doing? It's not moving. It's in the delay, the same delay the first bit was in. So that part will be equal. But what's it doing while it's in the fucking delay? It's moving fucking backward. The claim is that the two effects cancel out, assuming each is held for the same amount of time. And I've already pointed that out. I've said that exact words for everyone in all 4 of these videos. I've pointed out how the time delay is not the issue. The increase in the distance is the fucking issue. You fuck. Alright, let's say we have 2 bits spaced apart at distance delta I. Oh, yeah, well, you can't just give it a distance, 10 miles. The first bit is absorbed and is moving back at the speed v. It's absorbed again, it's trapped, so can't you just use the words I used? It's not moving. Alright? It's not moving forward anymore. It's moving backward. Okay. At speed v. While the second one is moving towards it at speed c. After time delta t, the first bit is readmitted. Okay, that's when the game starts. Alright? That's when the clock starts. And all you have to do now is account for the delay and what happens during the delay. Oh yeah, bit number 2 is moving in the wrong direction. Okay. At a specific instant, the distance between the first and second bit is made to be delta L blah 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 blah. This is because the distance was shrinking at a rate c plus v. The atom and the second bit were heading head-on to each other at their respective speeds. Well, the first bit is nothing's heading for it. So again, you're just ignoring my argument and this playing these whatever math games that can't undo the simple physics I've drawn you. I've drawn you the extra distance and you still are denying its existence. So fuck you, you're an idiot. After that, the second bit is absorbed and is moving back at speed v. It's not moving backwards at speed v. So I don't know what speed v is versus speed c. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what speeds they're moving. Any speed will do. So you can have the bits moving 10 miles an hour. You can have the atom moving 5 miles an hour in the opposite direction. It just goddamn doesn't matter because you're still going to create the same fucking effect, which is an increase in the wavelength, the distance between the fucking bits. Well, the first one is speeding away from it. So again, the first one's speeding away. What's the second one doing? It's moving backward from the starting line. It's moving backward. After a time delta t, the second bit is readmitted. And now the distance between the first and the second bit is blah, 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 blah. This is because the distance was growing at a rate c plus v. The atom and the first bit were moving apart from each other at their respective speeds. Well, again, they're never moving apart from each other at their respective speeds. Okay, because always if one's in the trap, one's not in the trap. So let's not bullshit here. The fact is they have a wavelength to going in. That means they all can't be in the trap at the same time. At least 2 terms cancel out, says you. The end result is delta L exactly as claimed. No bullshitting here. I am backing everything up. You didn't back anything up. I drew it for you. Alright? The scales were put right in front of you. I put the numbers on the scales and you're still denying what the scales do, what they have to do. You're creating more distance. You can't undo the greater distance created. I have picked the fucking horse up. I moved it backwards from the fucking line it was supposed to start at if the frequency was going to be the same. It can't be the same anymore because the delay is the same, but I've now also moved it backward. You can't undo that with this gibberish shit for brain. Alright, I'm just gonna block them. It's just not worth the trouble. I mean, it's way too many videos, and he's not addressing the explicit point. You can't make the backward motion disappear. It happened. You can't make it go away. So, fuck you. Alright, I'll give him one more chance. I'll just block this crap. I'll just delete the crap. Because I've read the crap. It's the same crap. Alright. Mook T3. Your previous video was very clear, at least to me. So I guess this is my previous video. The hold action of the atom plus moving against the photon, moving against, I think he said, meant the photon at very high speeds, even almost at light speeds, could create a frequency deviation. In my opinion, it is a very elegant proposal for redshift. If this is actually happening real life, that's another story. Yes, obviously it's but I'm just saying that I'm saying that physics did this with every subject. Every single thing, everything that was a little bit of a poser, like the two-slit phenomenon. By the time we hit the 1900s, they became desperate for a conclusion. They didn't want to stay in gray areas anymore. They didn't want to have to argue with each other about the elemental functions. They wanted it done. And so they started jumping evidence to jump to hard conclusions because they wanted to do more fancy stuff. And they can't do the fancy stuff on a foundation they know is shit. So until they make the foundation out of cement, everybody says, I can't build on that. So, you know, the Newton problem. I mean, yeah, I don't have an explanation for this. I don't have an explanation for that. I can tell you what it does. I can't tell you how it does it. All right? And they just couldn't stomach that anymore. And so they started jumping to conclusions. And that's all this is about, is a desperate jump to conclusions. And then once they have those conclusions, the rest of it is just rationalizations to keep them, even when they start to not make any sense because of new evidence that comes in. And so they just keep trying to cobble this piece of crap together. But I mean, they did it with all these subjects. I mean, bent space is obviously not a finished concept or idea. Oh yeah, space is bent. Well, it's not really bent, because you can only bend things in 2 dimensions. You can't bend things in 3 dimensions, so that doesn't make any sense anyway. So yeah, it's a convergence. Oh, but let's not call it a convergence. Let's call it an anti-divergence. I mean, that's the bullshit of this. I mean, it's got bullshit written all over it. All of it. All of it. All these hard conclusions based on weak, mushy, I mean, almost invisible evidence. All right, wait. That was a bit of a rant, sorry. The hold action of the, okay, you could do the frequency, right. Okay. So anyway, just important to say that they really just couldn't care less about this elemental stuff anymore and really proving it. See, they put all their nails in the fake coffin and they think they're done with it. We've buried the monster. The duality problem. You know, we buried it. You know, we put all our nails in the coffin. It's a wave. You know, bullshit. And that's all it is. And so it's my fault that I'm, just saying that, yes, the evidence has to stay weak. We can't make the evidence unweak. It's got to stay weak. And the argument is what's that weak evidence really point to? What do you think it could be? What do you think it could be an experiment that would prove or disprove? Yeah, well, I've already been through the list. Look, first off, the radar experiment. The guy was supposed to do it, blah, 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 this, that, and the other shit happened, blah, blah, blah. It's a little bit of a subtle experiment, a little difficult, because you're talking about 10 gigahertz. It's hard to manipulate frequencies that high, blah, 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 all that kind of crap. But clearly, the radar slit experiment, in my opinion, is obviously jamming. And the reason why they do the experiment with a tone is exactly for that reason, because it is jamming, and so there's no, so there's an experiment. I think you can aim electrons. So aim electrons at the double slit experiment and see what your results are. Because what I'm going to argue is the closer you shoot the electron to the slit, the more it's going to deviate. So it has nothing to do with any wave crap. And if we could aim photons, do the same thing. Shoot the photon close to the edge, shoot the photon directly in the middle, and you're not collapsing the wave function, you're not doing any of that crap, you're just aiming. Aim the photons, and I'll predict that if you shoot it right down the middle, it'll go right straight through. And if you shoot it a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, it'll start bending more and more, because it's a fucking magnetic field that every object has electrons around it and has a charge field around it. That's the Kashmir effect. And the effect happens before we can measure it. The Kashmir effect happens when things are this far apart. We can measure the effect when they're this far apart. But it's already happening out here, for fuck's sake. Okay, so, and the same thing's happening in a slit. And that's what's bending the light, is that light's hitting electrons and it's being refracted by the electrons. So there's those, yes, these are provable experiments. So what are you saying? I'm just saying, yeah, there's a ton of experiments. I can't do some of them because they require technical precision that I don't have. I don't have a small, tiny, I don't have the world's pencil thinnest laser. But if they use that, okay, they'll find out that this two-slit bullshit is bullshit. But again, I could just prove it by saying, look, the multi-slit clearly produces images. So someone just explained to me how wave interference creates perfect images of objects at different locations. So explain how wave destructive, bullshit creates perfect images. I've already been over it with the interferometer experiment, how they have no explanation. And I showed how just a layer of fucking dust, a layer of dust on a lens creates the effect, creates the exact same pattern as the whole interferometer creates. So one lens with dirt on it and a mirror will create the magical frickin' goddamn Michelson-Morley pattern. So, I mean, it's not like the evidence isn't there. It's kind of, some of it's easy to grab. I mean, all I can do is say, look, this is what I found. A plain piece of glass, a plain, not even a lens, just slide glass, and you blow on it. You can create the pattern, because it's a diffraction pattern, because the light's going through a bunch of slits, for fuck's sake. So I've already explained some of this. And I've explained how these are doable experiments. And what does physics do? They just pretend they've already done experiments they never did. They never did the detector experiment. And they keep lying that they did it, right? But what would happen if you actually did it? Well, my argument is you're not going to undo the single slit. So, it's not going to do what they say. All right. And if your detector is pointing in a direction, shooting energy in a direction, you'd say at minimum what it's going to do is push the pattern down. It might not even destroy it, just might push it in a direction. But they haven't ever tried, so how would they know? Except for keep lying about the fact that they already did it when they never did. All right. Okay. I may add that another way to explain your breaking the clock argument is to use the example of a quartz watch. They are highly affected by temperature. Yeah, exactly. Similarly, your proposal is that an atomic clock would be affected by movement, as a regular pendulum clock is affected by movement too. And this does not necessarily means that it is because of bending of space-time. Yeah, well, the simple argument is the light clock is the clock you can't break. That's the key to this whole thing, right? Light is so elemental that you can't break it as a clock. So this is what Einstein did, right? I'm explaining it again, but the light clock is just the idea that you shoot light horizontal, perpendicular to your motion. And when you do that, what happens to the light? Well, it appears to bend down, okay, because you're moving this way, right? So you're moving this way, you shoot the light perpendicularly. From your perspective of the moving guy, you're going to see the light bend down, all right? And so Einstein had to make that, he had to make the circumstance of the elevator in space, because if you're in the elevator in space and the elevator in space shoots you up, and you shoot light perpendicular, it will fall down because you can't break the light clock. And so he had to then make light on the earth do the same thing in gravity. He had to make gravity bend light down. And so he doubled the effect of gravity on light. Fact. Okay, I didn't make this up. He just arbitrarily, because if he's going to force those two things to be the same, he forced light to bend on the surface of the earth. And that's where it all came from. And they had to force it to bend a lot. Okay, so he doubled. So electrons, protons, atoms, people, we all get half as much effect of gravity as photons. So the fastest thing in the universe somehow is twice as affected by gravity. That's what they did to defend this stupid theory, and this stupid statement that Einstein never should have even bothered wasting his time with, this stupid equivalency principle. Because you don't acquire velocities the same way. Different accelerations are different accelerations. I would argue that. Velocity is velocity. That I'll say. All velocities are the same. But how you acquire a velocity is not the same. All right. What do you think it could... okay, what do you think it could be a good experiment to prove one way or the other possibility? The light clock. But again, there's nothing you can do. You can only do the thought experiments because the speeds you need, okay, to create the effect that you can measure are really insane speeds. I mean, you have to go very fast, you know, for the short distance you're shooting the light. So light clocks kind of require a lot of motion for you to see the effect. But you will see it. And the irony is these assholes will argue that the light actually bends forward with your motion, because the photons somehow have two momentums. They're going this way and sideways. You know. So they're not even getting Einstein's argument right. Einstein didn't say the light goes forward. Einstein said the light goes down. That's why he made gravity bend light. I mean, when you find out the real truth, it's just I'm surprised how fucking bad this crap is. It is such bad reasoning. All right, what do you think it could be? Okay, I'll read it. I guess I could argue that we should always go for the simplest explanation first. Well, obviously the more complete one is also a winner. So the one that answers more questions is also better. So I would argue to you, I'm the only person on Earth who has provided a rational theory of magnetism. One that actually works, that's really simple, and it works. Magnets are filters. I've explained where the energy comes from. They don't explain where the energy comes from. There's not another person explaining where the energy comes from for magnets. They talk about all this swirly crap, and there's no accounting for where the energy comes from. How does stuff have velocity? Where did the velocity come from? No one explains it except my theory. So obviously completeness would also be a really important thing. Simple and complete. So I'm saying I'm giving you gravity. That was easy. Magnetism, huge, gigantic bonus. And I've explained to you basically electricity is magnetism. It's just monopoles. The electron and the proton are the magnetic monopoles. Maxwell was an idiot to say there's no magnetic monopoles. Well, obviously the frickin' goddamn electron and proton are the monopoles, because guess what? When you put those two things close together, you have a dipole. That's how obvious this is, right? I mean, they all argue that an atom that has the electron on one side and the proton on this side is a dipole. It's a magnet. it will make the material magnet. If all the atoms line up head to tail, proton, electron, they know that'll create a magnet. And yet they won't say, quite obviously, the electron and the proton are the monopoles that make a dipole. That's how insanely broken their reasoning skills are. I mean, it's just so obvious that you can't say there's no monopoles, because it's obvious that the frickin' electron is the magnetic monopole and the proton is the magnetic monopole. They're the north and south pole of the magnet, the thing that causes magnetism. Fuck. Anyway, let's see. I guess you could argue. I lost my place somehow. Alright, I guess you could argue that we should always go for the I interrupted the sentence. Simplest explanation first, and that space-time bending is a cumbersome and ugly idea. It's not even an accurate idea, right? I mean, the damn shit doesn't bend. The bend thing is a two-dimensional gimmick that relies on gravity to explain gravity, right? So that's just horseshit. Some well... Oh, I fell down the well. Well, why'd you fall down the well? Oh, gravity pushed me down the well. Well, doesn't the well explain what gravity is? No, the well doesn't explain it. Gravity explains why you fall down a well. So the whole thing is just stupid. Explain gravity by using gravity. I mean, that's just bullshit. So again, the real Leonard Susskind explanation, when they do the deep physics is it's a constant conversion. The inside of every atomic bit is a vacuum cleaner that somehow is sucking ether or some kind of sucky crap, and the stuff is being pushed by the stuff you're vacuuming, the space you're vacuuming. That's how they diagram the mathematics. They diagram the mathematics clearly as fluid dynamics. Space is a fluid. I mean, it's just such horse shit. And to get all this obnoxious resistance, I'm just saying, can't you people admit that, man, they jump to so many conclusions on almost zero evidence, and start talking about how they nailed some freaking coffin when they didn't even do the experiments. Space bending is a cumbersome and ugly idea, but what are your thoughts about how to proceed in terms of proving this 2 points experimentally? Well, like I said, the time is a dimension thing. Obviously, it's very hard to prove the invisible man doesn't exist. So when they make up some fable, God story, I can't prove God doesn't exist. I can prove there's no logical reason to believe he exists, and that's all I can do. Like, all I can do is say there's no logical reason to jump to that non-physical answer, when there are physical answers that work, like mock gravity, and when the simple answer is clocks break. So find a clock that doesn't break, the light clock, and use that. And even when Einstein used it, like I said, he's figured out what it does. It's a speedometer. See, Einstein's basically saying you can't tell how fast you're going. Well, clearly you can if you have a light clock, because you just watch how much it bends. How much it bends tells you how fast you're going. It's a speedometer. And it's always going to be reliable, because you can't screw the light up. Alright. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. This way. Okay. Rephrasing Monk's point. Oh, well, that's just too irritating. Alice, Bob, and Cassie live together. Oh, shit. Alice leaves the house and starts walking to the market. After a while, Bob follows her, and after a while, Kathy follows Bob. They all walk at the same pace. Yes, they're all trapped at the store for the same amount of time. But guess what? The store moves away. Okay, while they're in the store. Alice, Bob, and Kathy are separated by some distance between each. Yes, fine. Okay, look, fine. This is a fine analogy. I can use the store. You didn't add the store, but yes, they all go to the store for 15 minutes. And while they're in the store moves away from their house. All right. Along the way, Alice gets abducted by people in a van that is moving in the opposite direction. The van people drug her to sleep for a while. Well, they don't even have to do that. They've stopped her walking, and they're going in the opposite direction. And dropped her off half a mile back where she had already walked. Yes. Unperturbed, Alice carries on to the market. Right, but Bob's already way ahead of her now. Bob runs into the same van. Well, I thought Bob was first. Sorry. I don't know. Well, anyway, Alice is first. Okay. Bob runs into the same van, and they do exactly the same thing to him. They drug him to sleep in the same amount of time, blah, blah. So if the van, you're saying that the same outcome would happen if the van never took them backwards. If that never happened, it'd be the same frequency. So if Alice just goes to sleep and sits in one spot, it's the same outcome as somebody picks her up and carries her a mile away. Or carries her to California. There's no change in the frequency. No, it's only she has to only walk from California all the way to wherever she lives, Maine or something. Some dopey place only a Piro could love. They drug him to sleep for some time amount and then drop him off a half mile back where he walked. Same for Cassie. Alice, Bob, Cassie arrive at the market late, but the distance between them remains exact the same distance as they had when they left the house. Well, it's not going to be the same distance because the van moves. Where Kathy interacts with the van is in a different place than where Alice did, in a different place where, so the backward motion adds up. The atom keeps moving. It doesn't pick them all up at the same place, move them backward, then bounce back to the starting line, pick them up, move them backwards, then go back to the starting line and move them backwards. No, it's moving them backwards from a backward position each time. So again, you're not accounting for all the variables, all the facts. Exact same distance as when they left the house because they all underwent exactly the same experience along the way. Well, it's not exactly the same. The pickup point and the drop-off points are different, and they're all in the wrong direction. They all got drugged for the same time and dragged back the same distance in the van. No, they weren't dragged back the same distance because the distance adds up. There's Alice's distance, Bob's distance, Kathy's, blah, 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 blah. Keeps going in that direction. Fuck. So, that's the woke guy. I shouldn't even let him comment because he's such a rude and obnoxious cunt. So, yeah, fuck you. Troll, you know, I mean, it's just sock account, unaccountable sock accounts. Fuck you. Alright, people aren't trying to tear your theory down. Yes, they are. To protect some religion. Yes, they are. The definition of a religion is a fable. I'm saying bent space, time as a dimension, is just a fable. There's no evidence indicating that Sasquatch exists. It's just a story they tell. Alright, now I'm pointing out how expanding universe based on just this shred of redshift evidence is just a fable. It's just a made up pile of crap. It's gluing a horn on a goat. It's that bad because the evidence is so thin. This is desperate that they are that they follow called the scientific method. Yes, well, the scientific method is fine. There's nothing, if they were doing the scientific method, they're not validating, they don't redo experiments. They can't successfully redo the editing experiment, yet they still think it's a great experiment. Okay, the stupid one, the entanglement experiment. I've never seen anybody duplicate, what's his name, Alan Aspect's experiment because he claims to have a copyright. I mean, it's privileged information, how he used his spinning mirror to do the magical experiment. Polarization experiment, by the way, where we already think I know for sure that polarizing filters collapse wave functions because they're not passive. You can't use them to detect what a photon is without changing the photon. They are changing the photons. So that doesn't work. I mean, their theory sucks. Their evidence sucks. The scientific method is you're supposed to confirm and verify, repeat, all that kind of crap. That's the scientific method, and they haven't done it. They're not doing that anymore. We haven't done science the way that you're doing science in 100 years, in hundreds of years. Yeah, well, it's true. There's no humility. They, again, I can only say they jump the evidence. And I'm saying, yeah, I understand conclusions. I think you can reach a reasonable conclusion about ether, because there's a few arguments where you say, like, I think the geometry argument sort of defeats ether. Okay, I mean, ether means it has to be an arrangement of stuff, like a checkerboard. And then you get into this problem with a checkerboard, that the diagonals move more distance, than the straight squares. They're longer diagonally. The squares are longer diagonally than they are this way. And so you can't create vectors that go in any direction. And there's just no evidence that the universe doesn't have free space. That is, a photon can go here or here or here or here, and it's exactly the same for that photon. There's no change in the geometry, where ethers just break down. You can't checkerboard the universe. I mean, you can do it as an analogy. Say it's like, but you can't say it is, because it just breaks what you know to exist, which is there's all kinds of you can't digitize something that's perfectly, something that what's the word I'm looking for, analog. You can only approximate then. So if you attempt to digitize it, you approximate it, and the universe isn't an approximation. We have your theory has no practical application. Well, it says you. I mean, I think one practical application is you'll quit wasting money on accelerators and a bunch of dopey satellite interferometers and all kinds of other wooey bullshit. Clearly, I think it could give you the power to exploit with your knowledge. And the fact is, if you understand that atoms are magnetically held together and they're not held together by any velocity and all that kind of crap, it might give you real capacity to manipulate them much better. Your theory has no practical it makes no falsifiable predictions. Well, frankly, it does make a ton of predictions that are I've already listed some of them, so I argue that that's bullshit. I mean, it predicts that you can't bend a photon with any force. Gravity doesn't matter. Nothing. No force is going to bend a fucking photon. You have to hit an electron to move the photon's vector. Fact. You can't bend it with a force. So there's a prediction. They'll be found to be totally wrong about gravity bending light. And the images are so bad, the galactic images are so bad, people should already know it's the truth. And the fact that there is no lensing where it should be. I mean, they have these stupid pictures of the black hole in the middle of the galaxy swirling all these stars, and you're saying, well, where's all the crap moving in the background? Where's all the stuff getting completely distorted by the intense gravity? Oh yeah, it's not there. Why isn't it there? I mean, all the noise that would be created in the images, the deep field images should have so much noise in them. Where is it? Oh, that's right. It doesn't exist. All they have is the smiley face, constellation, and it's astrology. They have astrology as solutions. Your theory has no. Okay, it does. It does make falsifiable predictions. If you again, I'll predict that if you aim photons or aim electrons into a double slit, if you aim buckyballs into the slits, that every time you shoot the buckyball near the surface, you'll get a lot of deflection, and when you shoot it more towards the middle, you'll get less deflection. It's a solid prediction I'm making. Alright, if you think that a theory of everything would have loads of falsifiable predictions, you would think. Yeah, well, I'm just saying I'm making loads of contentions about how the physics is wrong. I'm saying all clocks break, except a light clock. They're there. So fuck you. I mean, look, the real truth is that physics is difficult, right? We're talking about the smallest things in the universe, and they're impossible to view on a view screen. I can't just hit the Star Trek button and say, well, view it on the screen. I can't do magic physics. They can't do magic physics in the sense they do. They make up fake evidence. But I'm just saying, there's only a little tiny bit of evidence to work with. That's it. You can't change that. They have the same limitation I have. The only argument I'm making is that they're essentially lying, about experiments that never took place, and they're fooling people with silly, manifestations of their theory that have nothing to do with what the actual evidence says. I mean, they jump way past it, way beyond any evidence they have. And they'll say something like, GPS proves Einstein right, when no, GPS only proves there's a relationship between velocity and a retardation of atomic decay. That's all it proves, nothing more. It doesn't prove the existence of a time dimension. Anyway, even if we don't have the technology to test them. Well, again, I just pointed out how I'm making a ton of predictions that, yes, I can't test. So you're just wrong to say, oh, gee, well, your theory doesn't really change anything. Well, it does change things. Also, you seem to take anything other than kissing your ass as a personal attack on you. Fuck you, I do not. So go ahead and even prove that claim. So you just made a claim, right? I mean, obviously the ass kissers, I don't give them any applause, do I? Do I sit there and make them feel all gooey and happy and sit there and give them little doggy biscuits and shit and say, good puppy? No, I don't, asshole, and that's clear. So I'm pretty uninterested in useless argumentation. Somebody saying, I'm an authority, but I'm not. You're great. I mean, I know how useless that is. That's not meaningful evidence of anything. So yes, I'm not applauding it. I'm not saying do that. I don't mind, once in a while somebody saying nice job, but realistically, I'm clearly not in it for the accolades. I'm in it for the argument, and clearly the arguments are either desperately stupid in the sense that I have to explain how you can't avoid the red shift when you're on a moving train. There's nothing you can throw. There's nothing you can drop. There's nothing you can do. The red shift is happening because you're on a train going the wrong fucking way. You're making more distance between the events. That's going to increase the frequency, the wavelength. You can't help it. You can't stop it. And I have to sit there and argue that belligerent with these belligerently stupid fucks. And clearly things like the woke guy and stuff throwing a bunch of personal crap that just doesn't need to exist. So fuck you. I think I react as I should, because a lot of these comments aren't challenges to the physics. They're challenges to my right to even make an argument. That somehow I haven't explained it, and I haven't researched it, and I haven't somehow put the argument together when I have fucking done all of those things. I have spent the time, alright, to acquire the necessary knowledge to opine on the subject. And people attempt to diminish that effort and pretend it didn't take place when it has. I happen to be a fucking expert on some of this stuff, because no one's has spent as much time as I have spent looking at two slit experiments. It's just a fucking fact. Alright. So anyway, that's all for this video. Yeah. So anyway, I'll get to another subject. Which might, I know the time dilation one is on my list of why can't it be just broken clocks. Where's the proof it's not just broken clocks? No time dimension, just broken clocks. Retarded clocks. Again, they don't really have any evidence that if we actually move the speed of light, that we would slow down and everything would just, our metabolism would slow down, everything would just slow down. There's no evidence that it affects all clocks the same way. And in my opinion, there's every bit of evidence that if the matter becomes less and less stable, the more velocity you give it, and that instability would kill us long before we would freeze. I mean, it's essentially cryogenics. You know, you're multitasking so much. By increasing the velocity, you're multitasking so much that you've stopped all other functions. So it's basically cryogenics. You're not going to survive the process of being frozen. You know, so you're not going to be able to use it to travel the universe or any of that crap. Even if it was possible, you're never going to do it. Because it's not possible to survive it. But anyway, it's just people don't want the truth. People love liars. They love lying. It's clear. Let's see, is there more here? As a personal attack. No, okay, we already did that. Oh, look at that. Something made it to the spam folder. Yay. Ah, there it is. It's the comment to Mr. Keebler. Good. I was wondering where that went. So I will approve it. It's a stupid fucking comment. Go back to his 2-bit example. He says that the first bit will be absorbed, then emitted. And then the second bit will be absorbed, taken back, then emitted. Yes, the key being moved further away from the target. Each bit is moved more distance away from the target. That's how he depicts it, right? Yes, that's how he did. Oh, he changed this comment. This wasn't here before. If each bit is trapped in the hydrogen for 10 picoseconds, why don't you just turn it into real numbers, and taken back by 1 centimeter, then the arrival time to Earth is delayed by interaction times distance. I am absolutely accounting for the position change when it comes to the arrival time. You're not accounting for the fact that you can't get around the fact that when the second bit goes into the trap, the first bit is in free space and is moving constantly at the speed of light. And everything that happens to the second bit is now going to matter. And the point is the delay is going to create the wavelength that they had before. The delay is the important part for the wavelength being the same as it was before. And the key thing that will be different is it's moving further away from the first bit's direction while that's happening. And that distance you haven't accounted for. Alright. So I am absolutely accounting for the position change. No, you're not when it comes to the arrival time, not interaction time. Again, the interaction time has, while the interaction delay is happening, the store is moving away. Right. If the first bit is trapped for 10 picoseconds and pushed away by the target 1 centimeter, isn't this the same sentence? Anyway, arrives 43 picoseconds late by that formula, you get redshift. You need the second bit to arrive more late than that. Yes, it'll be more late because it has to get back to the fucking starting line. Once it gets free, it has to go back to the starting line first before it can even start to get back to normal. But if the second bit is also trapped for 10 picoseconds, so again, you just keep ignoring the distance is changing while it's in the trap and pushed away from the target by 1 centimeter, then it arrives 53 picoseconds late by the formula. So again, it keeps denying the fact that you can travel two different distances. One distance is this much and one distance is this much, and somehow you can travel those in the same amount of time. No, you can't. Alright, the only way you can change that is if the distance pushed back by atom increases for each sequential bit. The distance keeps adding up. You keep moving away. The target's here. The first bit moves backwards this much. The second one moves from here to here, so it's this much. The third bit is now this much away. Each one is progressively getting further from the target. Shit. You're too stupid. Alright, the only way you can change that is if the distance pushed back by the increases, but this is exactly what I said in my first post to begin with. And again, it's impossible for you to keep increasing the distance from the target and pretend that the starting line never changed. The starting line keeps going the wrong way. The starting line's running that way as each horse gets to it. Each horse is getting to a starting line that's further back. How can the distance between the horses be the same when each horse, like I said, if they all were just frozen in time for, so say that it takes 3 minutes to go around the track, and each horse is frozen for 1 minute. Well, it wouldn't matter, right? Because all the horses are frozen for 1 minute. They're all running at the same speed, so it doesn't matter. But if while they're frozen, they're moved backward, how can you not understand how the relationship between each horse then has to change? Fuck. Yeah, it's just no hope. Alright, now if you do say sequential bit is taken back by a longer distance than the previous one, then the entire position will fall apart when you scale this up to millions and millions of bits. Well, so now he's turning it into somehow the amount of movement of the store is different. No, it's just that the position you start and finish when you're moving the store, okay, the store hops from here to here. And the next time, the next person who gets in the store, they get in the store here, and then they hop to here, which is further away. And then when it's here, the next one gets in, and it hops back further away. Shit. Alright, anyway. I mean, I've said it so much. I mean, I'm sorry, this is just so redundant. Then the entire position will fall apart when you scale this up to millions and millions of bits. No, nothing's going to fall apart. You're just going to create a longer wavelength. It's classic Doppler shift. Eventually, a bit has to be taken back by millions of kilometers by a single hydrogen atom just to maintain the redshift and apparent time dilation of distant events. So again, millions of kilometers. You have some evidence that there's millions of kilometers of nanometer difference in the wavelength. No, we're talking about something being shifted, going from 700 nanometers to 650 nanometers. We're talking about a shift. All right, I mean this in the other direction, going from 650 nanometers to 700 nanometers. We're talking about 50 nanometers. Okay, we're not talking about millions of kilometers. So all of the atoms in billions of light years of space, they just have to create 50 nanometers of difference. Fucking asshole. So yeah, I'm not gonna, no, I'm deleting the I read it. It's crap. He still hasn't addressed the facts. The facts are undeniable. When the first horse leaves, the second horse is in the delay. While he's in the delay, he's moving away. Okay? There's no way you didn't just change the wavelength between the horses. Of course you changed it. Fuck! Okay. Again, this simple argument. So your argument basically is just saying that it's no different. If the atom is moving, the atom isn't moving, there's no effect. You're saying the atom moving has no effect. The train moving doesn't create Doppler shift. Of course it does. While you're on the train, you're Dopplering. Fuck. Fuck. Yeah. I wish I could. I'm just trying to say, look, the guy goes to the trouble to write all this shit, plays with his little delta, just time over, it's just a delta's just saying the change in something over time. But I mean, use all this bullshit, so it's not like he's a complete imbecile. And he just keeps ignoring the fundamental argument. No matter how you say it, he's just not getting it. He thinks they're all just going, well, again, he just keeps doing this, right? He keeps saying the starting line's here, and then each thing moved backwards, and then the starting line moved back here again, and then each thing moved backwards, and each starting line went back here again. And that's not what's the argument. All right. So that's the point he's missing, I think. But anyway, that's enough. Just can't do this forever. But this is what it takes, right? Every one of the subjects, you always get somebody who plays this game where you got to argue the minutia over and over and over. It's just, it's not very practical. Well, look, some of it is good because it forces me to answer questions that need to be answered, blah, 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 blah. So some of it's very productive because it actually forces me to say, oh, there is a problem. I have to, engineer a solution and blah, 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 blah. So that's good. So testing is good. But this is just a distraction from, I could be answering some question that actually needs to be answered rather than answering a question that really shouldn't need to be answered because Doppler shift is such an obvious thing. You're making more distance. Anyway, or less distance in the case of blue shift. But anyway, that's all. Yeah. So till next time and such.